He walked in like he'd been there 100 times, not looking around, not checking the menu, just walked right up to the counter and stared at me. And before I could even ask if he wanted coffee, he said my name. Not the one I'd always answered to, the one no one was supposed to know. He said, "You're Rachel Carson. I was there the day you vanished." And that's when the quiet life I thought I had started to come undone. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if stories like this ever brushed too close to home, tap like and subscribe. Every click helps bring another forgotten name back into the light. My name's Rachel Morgan. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I work mornings at a small café off Willow and Birch. Apartment upstairs, job downstairs. I've had the same chipped mug for 6 years, the same candle burning on the windowsill, the same view of the Rockies turning silver just before the sun hits them. Most people who know me would call me quiet, steady. I open early, sweep the entry light. The burners check the espresso lines. I'm not one for change, and that's the way I liked it. Or thought I did. The woman who raised me, Donna Parker, she lives a few miles away now. She adopted me when I was 7. It was just the two of us. No big story, no drama. She was calm, maybe a little distant, but there was comfort in that. I never questioned where I came from. I just didn't remember anything before her. Not really. Every now and then something would flicker like a smell or a song, and I'd get this strange ache in my chest, like missing a place I'd never been. But I told myself it was nothing, probably just childhood gaps, the kind everyone has. Then little things started happening, small, quiet things. I found an old necklace buried in a box of postcards, silver chain rusted, letter R. It didn't feel like mine, but my hands trembled when I held it. There were drawings, too, ones I don't remember making, of a yellow room with no curtains, a brass doorknob, the same window, over and over, 42 times in the back of my journals. My coworker Sienna once told me I reminded her of an old book. If someone opened you up, she said they'd find handwritten letters and pressed flowers. I smiled when she said that, but I didn't tell her the truth. That some days I felt like a book missing its first few chapters. Like you could read and still never really know what it was about. I thought maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. But then he walked in, the man in the olive green jacket. Tall, clean boots, quiet voice. He didn't look at the menu, didn't ask for coffee. He just looked at me like I was a ghost and said my name, not Morgan, Rachel Carson. He didn't look confused. He didn't look surprised to see me. His eyes didn't move, not even once, from my face. Just stood there in his weathered jacket like this was the moment he'd played out in his head 1,000 times. I asked him what he wanted. His voice didn't rise above a whisper. He said, "You're Rachel Carson." I just blinked at him. Said, "I think you've got the wrong person." But even I could hear the hesitation in my own voice. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photo. It was old, a little faded, folded at the corners like it had lived in a wallet for too long. A birthday party, red balloons, a little girl in a red hoodie holding a stuffed giraffe. She was smiling. Behind her, half hidden in the background, was a teenage boy. I knew the girl was me, and I knew the man in front of me was the boy in the picture. He said I was dating your sister. Amy. I was 16. You were 6. You disappeared that day. I didn't know what to say. My heart felt like it was trying to catch up to something it hadn't even seen yet. I just shook my head and stepped back. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my closet with a cardboard box I hadn't opened in years. It held school papers, drawings, postcards Donna had saved. But nothing from before I turned 7, except one thing, a necklace. A thin chain rusted at the clasp, a small pendant with the letter R. Not Rachel, just R. I didn't remember ever wearing it. But when I held it, something in me stirred. Not a memory. More like a feeling. like my body remembered something my mind didn't. I kept dreaming about the same yellow room, the same brass doorknob, the same slow, dripping sound. Only this time, when I reached for the knob, it turned. I started noticing other things I hadn't paid attention to before. There was a flyer once years ago pinned behind a poster on the community board at the library, curled at the corners yellowed with age. It said missing Rachel Carson, age 6. Last seen wearing red hoodie and jeans. I'd seen it before, and I'd told myself it must be another girl. Now I wasn't so sure. I remembered asking Donna when I was 12 why there weren't any baby pictures of me. She paused, said I didn't like cameras, that I'd cry whenever she tried to take a photo. It made enough sense at the time. Then at 17, I found a photo album in the attic, labeled Rachel, first years. I opened it slowly. Birthday cakes, Halloween costumes, trees with lights. But every picture was missing. One thing, me. Either I was turned away or blurred or not in the frame at all. In one photo, just a small hand reaching for a candle. I never asked Donna about it. I just put it back. I started writing things down. Dreams, images, the sound of a voice I couldn't place. The music that came before the nightmares. Sometimes I'd sit on the swing outside the café after closing and try to picture the face of my sister. But it wouldn't come. Just a presence. Like someone had once held my hand and let go too soon. After a few days, I went to an antique store near the edge of town. Asked the owner if they carried old yearbooks. He looked at me funny but pointed toward a stack in the back. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just flipped through them page after page. Then I stopped. Ridgewood Elementary School, 2005, first grade. There she was, a little girl with my eyes, my scar behind the ear, my red hoodie. But the name underneath didn't say Morgan. It said Carson, Rachel Carson. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that page. Felt like hours. That night I asked Donna again, sat her down in the kitchen, made tea the way she liked it. Then I said, "Do you remember anything about me before?" She didn't say a word for a long time, just stared into the steam rising from her cup. I asked again where I was before I came to her before the adoption. She said, "I think you were someone who needed a safe place." I waited, but that was all she said. So I walked back to my room, turned on the lamp, opened the little box where I kept the necklace. The R pendant caught the light just right. I turned it over and saw it something I hadn't noticed before. A date faintly etched on the back, 06/12/06. June 12th, 2006. That was the day I disappeared, or the day I was found. 3 days later, I was cleaning out the top shelf in the storage closet above the café. There was a box in the back that didn't belong to us. No label. Old cardboard. I almost left it there, but something made me pull it down. Inside was a music box, wooden hand-carved. The design was faded, but I could still make out pink roses along the sides. I wound the crank and a lullaby played. Slow. Haunting. I didn't recognize the song, but my body did. By the third line, I dropped it. The sound echoed off the floor. Inside the lid, tucked beneath the felt lining, was a folded piece of paper. Yellowed, brittle. It read, "For Rachel. Happy 6th birthday. Love, Amy." I took the music box, the note, and walked to the library. I pulled every article I could find about missing children in Spokane in 2006. It didn't take long. There it was, front page of the local paper, Rachel Carson, age 6, vanished from Ridgewood Park on June 12th. Witnesses reported a maroon van seen circling the playground. A plush giraffe was found by the slide. Amy Carson, age 12, had left her sister's side briefly to get ice cream. When she returned, Rachel was gone. I remembered that giraffe. I remembered the feel of it. The name. Mr. Tangles. I didn't tell anyone what I found. Not Donna, not Sienna. I took it all home and placed the music box on the kitchen table that night. When Donna walked in, I didn't say a word, just slid the newspaper clipping across the surface toward her. She stopped cold. Her eyes flicked from the paper to the box, then back again. Then she sat down like her legs couldn't carry her anymore. She whispered, "I wasn't supposed to know." Said they told her I had no family, no name, that I was a ward of the state. She didn't ask questions. She just wanted to be a mother again. I asked what she meant again. Donna reached into a drawer and pulled out a photo. A baby boy, no more than a year old. Her son, Mark. He died the year before I came. She said I didn't want to lose you too. I went back to my room, sat in the dark, and played the music box until the melody started to warp. Every time it reached that third line, my chest tightened. I saw flickers, a balloon, a carousel, Amy's hand, a man in a hat saying, "Don't cry now, it's just for a little while." I woke up gasping. My pillow was wet. The next morning, I packed a bag and drove. 5 hours north. I didn't stop until I reached the address from the old article. 1437 Elm Street, Spokane. Blue house, cracked walkway for sale sign in the yard. The mailbox still said Carson. I didn't knock. I walked around the side past the rusted gate. The backyard was overgrown. The swing set was still there. One yellow swing creaked in the wind. I stood there a long time. Then I saw it something half buried at the base of the swing. I knelt, brushed away the dirt. A bracelet, handmade. Tiny silver beads, a dangling letter A. I held it in my palm and closed my eyes. Something deep inside me shifted. I wasn't ready to say it out loud, not yet. But I knew now this wasn't someone else's story. It was mine. The bracelet sat in my palm for a long time. I didn't move. The swing creaked behind me in the wind and the light was starting to fade. The ground smelled like damp grass and rust. I thought about leaving it there, just pressing the bracelet back into the dirt and walking away like I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. I slipped it into my jacket pocket and walked back through the side yard, keeping close to the house. I didn't know what I was afraid of. The place was empty, but something about it felt watched, like the air had memory. Back in Denver, I went straight to the café without stopping at home. I didn't open. I just sat in the back by the old prep sink and waited for the man to come back. I don't know why I thought he would, but he did. 3 days later, just before closing, he walked in like nothing had passed between us. Same jacket. Same look in his eyes. I locked the front door behind him, flipped the sign, and asked him to sit down. He introduced himself. His name was Matthew Blake. Said he'd dated Amy Carson in high school. They'd been together almost 2 years. He said he was there the day I vanished. Said he remembered watching Amy walk away from me just for a moment to get ice cream. When she came back, I was gone. I asked him why he'd never told the police that part. He looked down at his hands and said Amy had begged him not to. Said it would ruin her mother. Said Margaret would never forgive her. She carried that he told me for the rest of her life. I asked where Amy was now. He hesitated. Said she died in a car accident 2 years ago. I didn't ask how. I could see it still sat heavy in him. Then he reached into his coat and handed me a small box. Inside was a cassette tape. On the label in faint blue ink, Rachel, "Don't listen unless she comes back." He said Amy had recorded it the week before the crash. He'd never listened to it. Said he didn't think he ever would. I told him I didn't have a cassette player. He nodded and said, "Your mom probably does." And just like that, he was gone again. That night, I sat in Donna's kitchen and slid the tape across the table. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. She got up, opened a drawer I hadn't seen her touch in years, and pulled out an old cassette player with the plastic peeling at the corners. She plugged it in. No words, no questions, just pushed play. Amy's voice filled the room. It sounded rushed, tired, young. "Rachel, if you're hearing this, then you found your way back. I'm sorry I lied. I was 12. I didn't know what to do. The man who took you wasn't a stranger. He was someone we knew, someone Mom trusted. He used to bring us candy at the park, told us stories. That day he said he needed help lifting something into his truck. I went with him. I left you alone. When I came back, you were gone. I saw his van drive away. I memorized the plate. I told Mom. She told me to forget it. Said we couldn't accuse him, that we'd ruin his life. But I think she knew. I think she always knew." The tape clicked off. The kitchen felt too quiet after that. I didn't look at Donna. I just asked, "Do you know who he was?" She got up without a word and opened another drawer. This one was deeper, tucked below the cutlery. She pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside were printed pages, some handwritten notes, a few photos clipped together. The name on the cover said Gerald Winthrop. Donna said he used to work with Margaret at the Ridgewood Library. Said he was quiet, polite, the kind of man who always remembered birthdays. I stared at his picture for a long time. Cold eyes, pale smile. I didn't recognize the face, but something in me did. The name, the shape of his tie, the way his hands were tucked in the photo. The yellow room came back again that night. The same one I'd drawn over and over without knowing why. Only now it had a name. Gerald Winthrop. The next morning I called in sick and drove back to Spokane. I went straight to the Ridgewood Library. The building had been updated since 2006. New carpets, better lighting. But the archives hadn't changed much. I asked the staff for employment records and sat for hours paging through dusty files. Gerald Winthrop had resigned in 2007. No explanation, no complaint, just stopped showing up. He'd relocated to Oregon, a small town outside Salem. I wrote the address down, but something pulled me back to Elm Street first. The house sat quiet in the afternoon light, still for sale, still peeling. I waited until the sun dropped low, then parked down the block and climbed the back fence. I went straight to the old shed. It had been boarded up with rusted nails. I pulled until one of the panels cracked free. Inside was dust, mold, stacks of broken furniture. But in the far corner beneath a fraying tarp, I found a wooden crate. Inside it were things I hadn't seen in 25 years. My red hoodie. Mr. Tangles, his ear clumsily stitched. A photograph of two girls, Amy and me, our hands sticky with what looked like ice cream. And a ribbon. Hair-thin. Blood-stained. I sat down hard on the floor of the shed and didn't move for a long time. The air felt too thick to breathe. I called Matthew from the back steps, told him what I'd found. He drove straight there. We called the police together. The evidence was taken, the shed sealed. An investigation reopened. For the first time in nearly 20 years, someone was listening. But that night, when I got back to Denver, I found my apartment door unlocked. My journals were gone. All of them. Nothing else was touched. Just the pages where I'd written about the dreams, the drawings, the names. On the kitchen table was a single cassette tape. No label, no markings, just a yellow sticky note folded once and stuck to the case. 4 words written in thin black ink. You don't want to remember. I picked it up, sat down on the floor, and I knew before I pressed play or said a word that everything was about to change. Again. I didn't press play that night. I wanted to, but something in my chest held back like a door that could open, but knew what was waiting behind it. I sat there on the kitchen floor until the sun started to rise, the tape still in my hand. When I finally stood, my body felt like it weighed twice as much. I didn't call anyone, didn't go to work, I just drove. Not north this time. West. I followed the name from the archives, the address scribbled in my notebook. Hollow Creek Road, just outside Salem, Oregon. The last place on file for Gerald Winthrop. It was 5.5 hours on mostly empty roads. The farther I drove, the more the world thinned out. Gas stations turned into pine trees. Fences, sagged with weather signs, faded into rust. When I found the house, I almost missed it. There wasn't a mailbox. Just a number nailed crooked to a tree. The roof sagged. The porch had buckled in one corner. The front door hung slightly ajar, like someone had left it open and never came back. I parked 2 houses down and walked the rest of the way. The air smelled like wet metal. Inside the house was silent. No power. The floor creaked under every step. Furniture was covered in old sheets, some yellowed at the corners, others fallen halfway to the floor. I didn't touch anything. I just moved slowly, letting the house settle around me. In the hallway closet, I found a narrow crawl space behind a cracked wood panel. It took both hands and a screwdriver from my glove box to pry it loose. What was inside didn't look like much at first. A box wrapped in insulation. 2 file folders. A broken tape recorder with a snapped microphone cable. A child's drawing stick figures in a yellow room, one figure with X's for eyes. And a red shoe, small, worn at the sole. It matched the one I was wearing in the old birthday photo Matthew had shown me. The box held medical records. Photos. My name or a version of it. Rachel Sessions. Date ranges from 2006 to 2008. Notes in stiff handwriting. Behavior reframing, identity suppression, auditory conditioning. The photos were worse. Me, small and blank-eyed, seated in a room with padded walls. Wires taped to my temples. A man behind a desk writing something I couldn't read. I stared at them until the words stopped making sense. Then I packed it all back in the box and drove straight to the nearest diner. Matthew met me there. He brought food I didn't touch. I slid the folder across the table. He opened it slowly, flipped through the documents without saying anything. When he reached the photo of the red shoe, his hand stopped. "This is what they did to you." I nodded. My throat felt too tight to speak. He leaned back, eyes still on the folder, then asked, "Do you know who your mother really was?" I told him everything Donna had said, about Margaret, about the adoption papers, about the name change. He listened, waited, then said we needed to go back to Denver, back to Donna. That night I knocked on her door like a stranger. She let me in without a word. I told her I'd found the house, found the crawl space. She didn't ask how. I said I needed all of it, birth certificate, custody records, anything she'd kept. She nodded slow, like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. She went downstairs and came back with a folder. She handed it to me and sat down across from me at the table, same spot she always drank her morning tea. I opened it. On top was my birth certificate. Not Rachel Morgan, not even Rachel Carson. It said Rachel Catherine Winthrop, father Gerald Winthrop, mother Margaret Carson. Below that were emergency custody transfer papers signed in 2007. A letter from Margaret. Handwritten. Please grant legal guardianship to Donna Parker. I can no longer keep Rachel safe. Too many people are asking questions. She deserves peace. My fingers stiffened around the edges of the page. She gave me away, I said. Donna's voice was barely audible. She said it was the only way you'd survive. I couldn't tell if I was angry or just hollow. Everything I thought I'd escaped, everything I thought had been stolen, suddenly it looked like something I'd been placed in. Hidden. Reassigned. I needed air. Matthew drove us back to the motel in silence. The next day, he started digging. Public records, court filings, licensing logs. He found what I didn't know how to look for. The Winthrop Institute, a private facility outside Salem, closed in 2011 after allegations of psychological misconduct. The phrasing was vague: experimental interventions, unverified consent. He found a name, Dr. Alan Kessler, a former employee who'd later become a whistleblower. In a stack of archived interviews, we found a line that stopped me cold. Subject RC. Isolation wing. Memory fragmentation. Behavioral regression. Audio reframing. They'd given me new birthdays, new objects, new names. In one session log, he wrote, "Subject clings to red giraffe toy. Continues asking for Amy. Association strong. Reframing incomplete." I dropped the page on the table. I couldn't read anymore. We drove home with the windows down. I didn't speak the whole way, just stared at the passing road, trying to figure out how to hold the pieces. When we got back to Denver, I sat in the apartment for a long time. Then I called the care facility in Spokane listed on Margaret's letter. She was still there. Early onset dementia. Hard to reach, not always lucid. I told them I'd be arriving the next morning. I didn't sleep, just packed a small bag and left before the sun came up. The nurse at the front desk led me down a quiet hallway, said Margaret didn't speak much these days. But when we entered the room, I stopped in the doorway. She was sitting by the window, humming softly. The tune made my stomach turn. It was the melody from the music box. I stepped closer, said Mom. She looked at me. Her eyes were watery but clear. "You came back," she said. I sat beside her and asked the question that had burned through every dream I'd had since I was 6. "Why did you give me away?" Her hands trembled in her lap. "I couldn't protect you," she whispered. "Not from him. But Donna could. I begged them to let you forget, to let you live a normal life." I didn't know if it was an excuse or a confession, but in that moment, I didn't see the woman who let me go. I saw someone who'd already lost too much. I held her hand, told her I didn't forget. She smiled, just barely. "I'm sorry," she said, and then she went quiet again. When I left the building, the sun had started to dip low behind the trees. Matthew was waiting by the car. But before I could reach him, he stepped forward suddenly. Someone was standing by the driver's side door. A man in a gray coat. I stopped cold. He turned slowly. His hair was thinner now and his face a little sunken, but I knew him. The eyes hadn't changed. Cold, exact, like looking through glass. Gerald Winthrop didn't speak. He just looked at me like someone waking up from a dream that had lasted too long. Then he said, "To finish what I started." Matthew moved in front of me, asked what he meant. Gerald tilted his head. "You weren't the only one, Rachel. You were just the one who survived it. You were a success." I whispered, "I was kidnapped." He smiled faintly. "No, you were selected." The police arrived 18 minutes later. Gerald was gone. No tire marks, no security footage, no name on record. Just an echo in the air that something dangerous had returned. And this time, he knew I was remembering. The police filed their report like they were checking boxes. They listened to me and to Matthew, and they took down the address and the time, but I could feel it in the way their pens slowed down near the end. No prior criminal record, no confirmed identity, no video footage. They asked if we'd considered stress or trauma. I didn't argue. There wasn't anything left to say. After they left, Matthew sat on the edge of my couch, hands laced, eyes still scanning the front windows. I didn't sit down. I paced. I opened every drawer in the apartment, not because I thought something would be there, because I had to check. That night I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. When I was 16, I found a letter in Donna's closet. It was folded behind a box of tax forms. I thought it was a poem. Amy's name was on it, but the lines didn't rhyme. It didn't make much sense. At the time, I'd shoved it in my old yearbook and forgot about it. I pulled the yearbook down from the shelf and flipped through until I found it. Same paper, same ink. But something clicked this time. The first letter of each line wasn't random. They spelled out a message. Check the lockbox, 22nd Street, Unit 9B. I showed Matthew. He didn't say anything, just grabbed his keys. We drove across town to the industrial district. The storage facility had been shut down for over a decade. Half the units were rusted shut. Unit 9B was at the end of the row near the fence line. The lock was old but easy enough to break. Inside was cold air concrete and a single suitcase. Next to it, a shoebox and a sealed fireproof envelope. The suitcase held children's clothes, faded small, one red hoodie folded neatly, a worn pair of jeans, a journal in a child's handwriting. The pages were full of drawings. The yellow room, a tall man, a red swing. The same scenes over and over. One page had a stick figure reaching for a door that never opened. In the shoebox were cassette tapes, dozens. Each labeled by hand RC-117, RC-118, RC-119, dated between 2006 and 2008. I picked one at random and slid it into the cassette player I'd brought from Donna's house. The sound clicked on with a hiss, then my own voice. Young, tired. I don't like the yellow room. I want Amy. Please let me out. There was a pause, then a man's voice. Calm. Steady. We're making progress. Fear response is reduced. Association with Amy remains strong. Recommend another cycle before new identity schema. I stopped the tape. My hands felt cold. The envelope had my name on it. Rachel Catherine Winthrop. Inside was a second birth certificate. Not the version Donna had shown me. This one was earlier. State of Washington. Signed. Official. It matched the one from the crawl space. It confirmed everything. Gerald wasn't just the man who took me. He was my biological father. Margaret Carson hadn't given me away to a stranger. She'd taken me from him. Donna hadn't adopted a missing child. She'd hidden a daughter from a man who once had legal claim to her. I sat down on the floor of the unit and didn't say anything for a while. It was quiet except for the wind rattling against the metal doors. Matthew crouched next to me, not speaking. We didn't need words. Everything had shifted again. We took everything to the police the next day. This time we were lucky. A detective named Elena Briggs was assigned the follow-up. She looked over the files without blinking. Said she had a daughter once lost too young. I think that's why she believed me. She opened a new inquiry. Dug into the Winthrop Institute, tried to subpoena surviving records. The tapes alone were enough to trigger a preliminary review. She said she'd contact me within the week, but she never did. 2 days later, she was found unconscious in her home. Gas leak. Carbon monoxide, they said. No foul play suspected. But I knew better. The same afternoon, Matthew stopped answering his phone. I went by his apartment. Empty. No sign of struggle. No note. Just a single object left behind on his kitchen table. My music box. The crank still spinning. I turned and walked out without saying anything. That night I didn't sleep. I pulled out every paper, every photo, every piece of evidence, and laid them across the floor of my apartment. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. A line from the last tape I'd played. Some cages aren't made of bars. Some are made of memory. I opened the second crawl space at Donna's house, the one behind the water heater. I don't know why I hadn't checked it before. Inside was a single VHS tape and a folded note. This is who you were. Decide who you want to be. I brought the tape to a repair shop that still converted analog to digital. They said it would take hours. I waited in the car. When they handed it back, I drove home, closed all the blinds, and hit play. The screen opened on a home video. A man's voice said, "Rachel, look at the camera." A toddler version of me laughed, spinning in a yellow room. Then the video cut. Same room. Dimmer light. I was older. Crying. A voice off-screen shouted, "No more crying. We're almost done." The camera tipped sideways. Static. I watched until the tape went black. Then I whispered the only thing I could. "I'm still here." I mailed copies of everything to news stations, local, state, even national. Most didn't respond. But one journalist did. Her name was Carla Mendez. Her brother had gone missing in 2003. Similar age, same area, same behavioral profile. She wanted to know more. We started talking late at night, always on burner phones, always in public places. She dug deep, found a memo connecting the Winthrop Institute to a government study, something called Project Echo, behavioral conditioning, identity interruption. She also found something worse. Gerald hadn't died in 2011 like the records claimed. He'd simply changed names. New job, new city, still working under government contracts, still buried inside the system. And then, without warning, I got a letter. No return address. Inside a photo. Matthew, bruised, hands bound, seated in what looked like a storage room. On the back, scrawled in thin black ink, "Come alone." 47 hours. I turned the envelope over once more. No sender, no signature, no location. But I recognized the clock on the wall in the photo. It wasn't much, but it was something. I called Carla, told her everything. If anything happens to me, I said, you release it all. She said she already had it queued up. Don't die, she added. I didn't promise. I just said, not planning to. Then I packed a bag, tape, cash, a photo of Amy, and drove toward the one place I never wanted to see again, Red Valley Medical. The place they shut down in 2015. The place where I knew Gerald would be waiting. Red Valley Medical looked even worse in daylight. It sat off a service road 2 miles past the edge of town, a square block of crumbling brick behind a rusted chain-link fence. The official sign had been pulled down, but someone had spray-painted the words, "Keep Out," across the doors in black slashes. I parked behind the building where the tree line thickened far enough not to draw attention and waited. Nothing moved. No birds, no cars, no sound except the wind pulling through the broken windows like breath through teeth. I zipped my coat, grabbed my flashlight, and went in through the side where the emergency exit had been propped open with a brick. The air changed as soon as I stepped inside. Cooler. Wet somehow, like the walls held onto rot. My boots scraped across old tile covered in dust and bits of plaster. The lobby had been stripped, no furniture, no equipment. Just the outline of where things used to be. The clock above the nurse's station had stopped at 6:47. Same time from the photo. I moved fast, but careful. Kept close to the walls. I checked each room on the first floor. Nothing. A few broken monitors, cracked linoleum, some scattered papers so faded they crumbled when I touched them. I climbed the stairs to the second level. That's where the pediatric wing had been, according to what Carla found. I counted 8 doors on either side of the hallway. I opened them one by one. The 5th door stuck. When I pushed harder, I saw why. There was a chair pushed against it from the inside. I shoved harder until the hinge gave and the door scraped open with a groan. Matthew was there, slumped in the corner tied to the same chair. His head was low eyes swollen shut, one arm pulled tighter than the other. I crossed the room fast and knelt beside him. He stirred. Said my name just once. I didn't have time to answer. A voice came from the back of the room. I warned you. Gerald stepped out of the shadows like he'd been waiting. His hair was shorter silver at the edges now. Same coat. Same steady gaze. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired. Like he'd been through this before. He said, You weren't supposed to come back here. I stood. Between him and Matthew. I said, You did this. All of it. Gerald nodded slightly. You remembered. Then he took a step closer. I saw something in his hand. Small. Metal. A syringe. I didn't wait. I grabbed the lamp from the table behind me and swung hard. He dodged it easily, years of precision still sharp. He grabbed my wrist. I kicked his leg and we both went down. The syringe skidded across the floor. We fought quiet, focused, like two people who knew there was no one coming to help. He slammed my shoulder into the ground. I drove my elbow into his ribs. He rolled back and reached for the syringe, but I kicked it out of reach. He lunged again. I grabbed a length of pipe from the corner and swung. It caught him in the side of the head. He crumpled, groaning, bleeding from the temple, but alive. I stood over him, chest heaving, hands shaking. I said, "You created a monster." He looked up, dazed. I added, "And I buried her." Then I turned back to Matthew, cut the restraints, and got him to his feet. We limped down the hallway through the stairwell back out into the open air. I used a payphone at the gas station up the road, called Carla, told her to release everything. She didn't ask questions, just said I'm ready. Within hours, it was everywhere. The footage, the files, the names, the tapes. Carla had prepared a full timeline, sent copies to 5 news outlets, 2 senators, and 1 national advocacy group. It all hit at once. Winthrop was taken from the hospital in handcuffs, federal charges pending. The Project Echo was exposed in detail. Grants, contractors, the names of children, all of it. More survivors came forward. Some remembered their names, others only fragments. But the patterns matched. I didn't speak to the press. I didn't give a statement. I just watched from a distance as the world reacted to something I had already lived through. Donna passed away 2 weeks later. A stroke. Peaceful, the nurse said. In her will, she left me a letter. You were never mine, but I loved you like you were. I didn't know how to speak through shame. I hope one day you'll understand the silence. I sat by her headstone with the letter in my lap, left a single rose, and whispered, "Thank you for hiding me." Margaret Carson passed shortly after. Complications from her dementia. I attended the funeral in silence, stood at the back, didn't speak to anyone. When the casket lowered, I stepped forward and placed the music box on top, cranked it once, let the lullaby drift into the wind and stop. Matthew moved to Portland after his recovery, said he needed to start over. We talk sometimes, quiet check-ins, no expectations. Just, I'm here if you ever need me. I always say the same thing. I'm learning to need myself first. Carla published the book a few months later. The Girl in the Yellow Room. She dedicated it to me, to Amy, and to the ones whose names still hadn't surfaced. It made the bestseller list. People asked if I would ever speak publicly. I didn't answer. I just kept moving. But something stayed with me. A feeling I couldn't shake. That we hadn't reached the bottom of it. That there was still something left. One thread hanging loose. I opened the envelope that came in the mail with no return address. Inside was a copy of a document I hadn't seen before. A flight manifest from 2006, a private charter. Gerald's name listed under a pseudonym. One other name blacked out. Destination marked internal. No coordinates, no timestamp. Just the words, Phase 2 complete. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it, placed it with the others, and turned out the light. I knew what it meant. This wasn't the end. Not yet. The document didn't explain anything, not really. But it shifted the ground beneath me in a way I couldn't ignore. A manifest with Gerald's alias. One other name, redacted, no coordinates, and the phrase, Phase 2 complete. I didn't know what Phase 2 was. I didn't know who else had been on that plane. But I knew where to look. I went back through every note, every audio file, every scrap of paper I'd saved. Late that night, I remembered something from one of the Winthrop tapes, a line I hadn't thought much of before, a reference to a second facility, storage facility Echo Bravo. At the time, I thought it was jargon, but now I wasn't sure. Carla was the one who found it, a decommissioned research lab listed under a parent company with ties to defense contracts. Echo Bravo wasn't a name. It was a call sign. She traced the address to a site near the Idaho border used briefly by a subcontractor, then shuttered after an internal audit. No public record of its existence, no satellite data past 2012. She told me she didn't like how fast the trail went cold, and then she went quiet. For 2 days, I couldn't reach her. No texts, no calls. Her email bounced. On the third day, a burner phone I didn't recognize rang in my coat pocket. I answered, and her voice came through fast and low. "They know I've been helping you," she said. "I'm safe. For now. But you're not." I asked her where she was. She didn't say. She told me to check my mailbox. Then she hung up. Inside was a flash drive. No label, no note, just a plain silver casing. I plugged it in on a public library computer. The files were encrypted, but one folder opened. Dozens of medical records, project memos, and photographs. Most were labeled with initials, some with code numbers. One stood out. RCW2, my initials, my birth year. The photos weren't ones I'd seen before. They weren't from the yellow room. These were from a different location. Fluorescent lighting, higher ceilings, a mirrored wall. My face expressionless. Beside me, in several shots, were other children. Most looked dazed, unfocused. One girl had her hands pressed flat against the wall like she was searching for a door. One boy sat with his arms wrapped around his knees. Every timestamp was after the date I was supposed to have been found. It meant I hadn't just been held. I'd been part of something ongoing, something structured. I printed everything I could before the library system logged me out. I drove back to the motel where Matthew was staying, spread the pages across the bed, and showed him what Carla had sent. He read every word slowly. Then he pointed to a memo I'd missed. It listed 4 initials: RC, MJ, EB, and AS. Next to each was a designation: subject past transition phase, subject reassigned, subject non-compliant, and one line that made my stomach drop. Subject terminated. See Echo Bravo archive. I looked back at the faces in the photos. I didn't know who MJEB or AS were, but I knew they had been real. I knew we had shared the same hallways, the same cold floors, the same room with no corners. Matthew asked me what I wanted to do. I didn't answer right away. I just gathered the papers, folded them into a file, and said I needed to go back to Spokane. One last time. The drive was long but familiar by now. The curve of the highway. The way the pine trees bent toward the road like they knew something. I didn't go back to the Carson house. Not right away. I went to Ridgewood Park. It was late afternoon. The slide was still there, faded red plastic. The swing set had been repainted, but the metal poles were the same. I stood by the spot where the giraffe had been found, and I waited. I don't know what I expected. Some kind of pull, maybe. But all I felt was the air shifting around me. Then I walked. Past the slide, past the picnic tables, toward the edge of the trees that lined the back of the park. I hadn't noticed it before. A narrow path almost hidden by overgrowth. It led to a small clearing. Nothing more than a patch of grass with a few concrete slabs. At first I thought they were old footings, but when I knelt to touch them, I felt something smooth beneath the dirt. Tiles, cracked but still holding the shape of a floor. There had been something here once, something built then torn down. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my hands, and backed away slowly. That night I stayed in a small inn near the lake. I laid everything out again, photos, documents, my own journal pages. I drew a timeline. I started from the beginning, my disappearance, Amy's silence, Donna's adoption, The tapes, the redacted, manifest the file from Carla. When I stepped back, I saw the shape of it for the first time. A triangle. 3 key names: Gerald Winthrop, Margaret Carson. One unknown figure, the second passenger. Whoever they were still out there. Still redacted. Still untouched. I circled the initials from the memo. RC, MJ, EB, AS. I underlined the word non-compliant. That was me. I hadn't followed the pattern. I hadn't responded to the programming. I hadn't stayed silent. I realized then what I'd been to them. Not a daughter. Not even a subject. Just a test case. One with a label. One they never thought would survive long enough to speak. But I had. And now I wasn't the only one. The next morning, just before leaving town, I stopped by the Timberline Diner. I didn't sit down. I just stood in the entryway looking toward the third booth from the back, the one Donna used to sit in, the one where it all began. A young waitress with a notepad asked if I needed anything. I shook my head, told her I was just passing through. She smiled politely, unaware of everything that had unfolded within those 4 walls. I stepped back out into the morning light. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready to face it, whatever it was. The drive back from Spokane was quiet. I didn't put on music. I didn't call anyone. I let the miles pass without thinking too hard. Somewhere past the Columbia River, I realized I hadn't cried. Not since Margaret. Not when I found the tapes. Not even after that final name on the manifest. But there was a weight on my chest that hadn't moved in days. When I reached Idaho, I didn't go home. I went north, followed the side roads until I hit the lake near Coeur d'Alene. It was off-season. Cabins were shuttered. The air held that sharp wood smoke smell that always seems to come in October, even when there's no fire. I rented a place under a fake name, Kate Dwyer, the one I'd used after I first disappeared. Paid cash. No questions asked. The cabin had a wood stove, a kettle, and a narrow view of the lake through the pine trees. That was all I needed. For the next week, I stayed quiet. Didn't turn on the news. I moved the table by the window and spent my mornings writing. Nothing polished, just fragments. Letters I never sent, dreams I couldn't explain, and memories half-formed flickering of Amy's laugh, the shape of Mr. Tangle's ears, the hum of a lullaby that always ended too soon. One night I lit a candle and opened a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a cassette labeled, "Only Once Amy, Final Session." I almost put it back. Almost left it for a day. I felt stronger. But something told me I needed to hear it now before I could talk myself out of it again. The tape hissed as it started. Then Amy's voice, shaky but clear. "Rachel, if you're hearing this, it means I failed. I'm sorry. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to tell you everything. But I couldn't. Not when they were watching." Her breathing was ragged. She paused. Then said, "You are more than what they did to you, more than what they tried to make you forget. You're still my sister. You're still light. Don't let them rewrite that." The tape clicked off. I didn't move. I didn't reach for the recorder. I just sat there on the floor, knees to my chest, and let the silence hold me. For the first time in my life, I wept. Not the frozen, shallow kind. This was deep, full, the kind of grief that doesn't ask permission. It wasn't just for Amy. It was for the little girl with the red hoodie and the scar behind her ear. For the girl who drew the same yellow room 47 times and never asked why. For the teenager who sat in Donna's kitchen trying to make sense of photo albums where she didn't appear. and for the woman who kept waking up from dreams that turned out to be true. The next morning I packed up the cabin, left the key on the hook, drove south. I didn't tell Carla I was coming. I just showed up at the coffee shop where she always worked in the afternoons, one of those places with chalkboard menus and second-hand books on the windowsills. She saw me walk in and didn't say a word, just nodded toward the back booth. We sat there for over an hour. No tape recorders, no files, just two people who had carried different pieces of the same puzzle. When I finally spoke, I said, "There were others. I don't know how many, but I think some are still out there." Carla leaned forward. "Do you want to find them?" I nodded. "I think it's the only thing that'll make any of this mean something." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were 4 names. Only one I recognized, Elias Barrett, a boy who had vanished from a playground in Spokane in 2005. The other 3 were newer, all between the ages of 5 and 7, all missing, all unsolved. Each case bore some trace of the same pattern, lost, time-altered records, sightings that didn't match the child's age. She looked at me and said, "I think they're still using parts of it. Smaller scale, tucked into private programs." It didn't die with Winthrop. I took the folder home, sat with it for hours. Each name felt like a thread someone else hadn't pulled yet. I couldn't rescue Amy. I couldn't undo what they'd done to me. But maybe I could stop it from continuing. A few weeks later, I gave a statement to the Department of Justice. Quiet, off the record. Carla coordinated it. I told them everything I remembered, everything I had. The recordings, the documents, the manifests. A few nodded. One asked if I was certain my memories hadn't been influenced by trauma. I answered, yes, and the tapes back me up. I left the building feeling nothing, just clear, like I'd finally put something down that wasn't mine to carry anymore. That night I walked to Amy's grave. I hadn't been back in months. The stone was smooth, unweathered. Someone had left a plastic sunflower. I crouched beside it and ran my fingers over her name. Amy Carson. Big sister, protector, truth teller. I whispered, "I found her, Amy. I found me. And I'll find the others. I promise." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the giraffe keychain, hers, the one she gave me the week before I vanished. I placed it gently at the base of the stone and stood. The wind picked up. Leaves skittered across the grass. But the air felt different now. Not lighter, not healed, just real. My final night in town, I stayed in the same inn by the lake. I sat by the window with a candle burning low and opened the last page of my journal. I didn't write much, just a sentence. The world didn't apologize, but I'm still here. I closed the book and left it on the nightstand, for whoever came next, for the next girl who forgets her name, for the one still waiting to be found. I stayed one more morning by the lake, just long enough to watch the mist rise off the surface and vanish into the tree line. I didn't bring the journal, didn't bring the folder or the tapes, just a thermos of coffee and the silence. That was enough. I'd spent so many years trying to piece things together, trying to prove I was real, that what happened to me had shape and consequence. But that morning, I wasn't looking for proof. I just wanted stillness, the kind that doesn't ask questions. The investigation around Project Echo stayed open for a while. Carla kept tracking leads even after the media cycle moved on. She told me one of the labs had been quietly dismantled 6 months before the first story broke. No files, no staff, nothing left but concrete slabs and scrub grass, just like the clearing behind Ridgewood Park. She found signs that the funding had been rerouted. Smaller contracts, different names, but the structure was the same. They hadn't stopped. They'd only gotten quieter. Gerald Winthrop died in federal custody before his trial began. Complications from a stroke, they said. No statement, no confession, no apology. I didn't need one. He was a man who built walls out of silence. Let him vanish behind them. Matthew called every few weeks after that. We never talked about the tapes or the cabin or the night at Red Valley Medical. We just talked. Simple things. How the trees were changing in Portland. What books he was reading. One call he said, "You sound different." I asked how. He said, "Lighter." I didn't answer right away. But I think he was right. Carla published a follow-up. Not a book this time. Just a long article. Quiet, focused. She named the kids who hadn't been found. Shared their photos, their timelines. She ended it with a line I still remember: "If you've forgotten your name, someone out there hasn't." I keep a printout of it in my drawer. As for me, I didn't go back to Denver. I found a town up north where the streets stay quiet after 8 and no one expects you to tell your whole story at the grocery store. I got a small apartment above a hardware store. I teach part-time at the library. Kids come in after school and I help them read out loud. Sometimes they get frustrated, mix up their letters. I always tell them it's okay to forget. What matters is that you keep trying to remember. There are days when the dreams come back. Yellow light, the sound of a doorknob turning. But I don't wake up afraid anymore. I wake up knowing I got out, that I lived, that someone like Amy loved me enough to leave a trail, and that somewhere someone else might be waiting for a voice that sounds like theirs. If this story stayed with you, tell someone. Share it, even quietly, because there are names that still haven't been spoken out loud. And maybe, just maybe, yours is the one that helps bring them back.